Danielle Carpino here of Humble Tree Homestead. Welcome to our channel. We're happy to have you here. Today I wanted to discuss with you guys a problem that I have ran into with my cucumber plant, which if I'm running into it means that probably somebody else out there is experiencing the same problem. I have noticed that my cucumber plant, while it looks wonderful, it's producing great vegetation, it's got lots of blossoms, but when I look closely, I don't have cucumbers. And the reason for this is because it's not producing a lot of female blossoms. It's producing male blossoms. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss some of the things that I've tried, some of the things that I'm currently trying, and then we will reconvene in a week's time on this same video. So for you guys, it'll be a blip. But for me, it'll be a week's time, and we'll kind of see if we're noticing a change in the plants after the things that we've done. Now that I'm out at my garden, you can see that vegetation of this plant is definitely not the issue. It's not a heat issue. It's not lack of water issue. It's really not a lack of blossom issue. It's a lack of the correct blossoms. It's a lack of female blossoms and an abundance of male blossoms. So let's go over some of the things that we can do in order to remedy this problem and actually produce. First important thing for us to do is to actually understand what a male versus a female blossom looks like. If we don't know this, then we don't really know what we're looking at on our plant, and it really makes it hard to actually troubleshoot what your issue is if you don't really know what you're looking at. So right here, what we're looking at, these are male blossoms. You know that because if you look behind them, you'll see that they have a very long, thin stem that leads up to a blossom. Inside that blossom has the stamen, which is where the pollen collects, and then that is what will fertilize the female plant. Again, you have a long, thin stem followed by just a blossom. That is your male blossom on your plant. Here, what you're looking at is the female blossom. You can see that it's very different. This one has not opened, but you can still see that it's extremely different from the first one I showed you. It has a thicker stem, followed by the ovary of the plant, which is actually what your fruit comes from. And then at the very end of the fruit ovary, you have what is going to be the blossom when it opens up. This one's not blooming yet, but this is what a female blossom looks like. When the blossom opens up, it'll look exactly like male blossom, but the difference is this right here, that formation of the fruit or the ovary of the plant. If you have a female blossom that properly got pollinated, this is what it'll start to look like within a few days. That stem is going to get significantly thicker. Your fruit is going to drop. You're going to notice that it's getting much larger and looking kind of engorged. And then that blossom at the end is going to start to dry up. So this is what a pollinated female blossom is going to look like. Right here, a female blossom that did not get fertilized, and you'll notice that because within a few days it'll just start to shrivel up and look like it's dying off. This is helpful because it helps you to know what you're looking at, what the problem is. Is there no females that are forming? Are the blossoms just not open yet? Are they drying off because they're not getting pollinated? That way you can assess what the problem is and actually take care of the plant and its issue. This is going to be a pretty quick dive into fertilizers. We'll go a little bit more in depth in a future video, but I just wanted to kind of explain this to you guys so that you know here why we're choosing the fertilizer that we're going to be choosing to put on the cucumber plant. When you turn over your package, you should see percentages of what makes up this fertilizer. You can see here that this fertilizer has 4% nitrogen, which is still a pretty high amount. You can get much higher, don't get me wrong, but this one does have nitrogen. Nitrogen is going to make more vegetation. It's going to grow more leaves, grow more plant. In this particular circumstance, what we are looking for is we are looking to grow more blossom. Adding in bone meal or some kind of fertilizer that is high in phosphorus and potassium. So if you look at this label, you can see on there that there's only 2% nitrogen in there. So while it's going to help your plant, it's not going to focus primarily on vegetation and leaf growth. This one is high in phosphate and calcium. So you're getting more chance for those male and female blossoms to set on your plant, giving you a higher yield come harvest time, instead of just having a wasted plant that's not producing anything other than leaves and stems. Cucumbers are very heavy feeders. They're going to require a lot of nutrients, and things like potassium and phosphorus are not easily available in the soil. They're there, but they're more widely spread. So it's hard for the plant to find the concentrations that it needs. So supplementing and adding in fertilizer is going to help that plant readily be able to find those nutrients and take it up into the plant so that you can actually get what is needed to produce more blossoms throughout the season. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take that according to how much it said, and I am going to put it around that area. Now remember, you want to pay attention when it comes to doing fertilizers that you are noticing how much it says that you can put on your beds, because too much of a nutrient is a bad thing. Not enough, same problem. So I paid attention to what mine says. I'm not going to give you what it says because each fertilizer is completely different, and you really have to do according to what your fertilizer specifications are. So I'm just putting it all around that area so that way those roots of this plant can find the nutrients that it needs and easily distribute it throughout the plant instead of trying to hunt for things that aren't readily available in my soil. This one says to rake it in, so I'm going to go ahead and follow those directions and just rake it in, and that's supposed to help not burn your roots. Now what I'll do off camera is I'll go through and do this entire bed. These ones all will thrive and do better with this fertilizer. Okay, so one thing I want to teach you guys is that if you are watering and it's really hot outside, make sure that you get the hot water out of your line. I just was going to put water on my garden and realized that the water that was coming out of it was hot, and that can actually cause more damage than good to your plant. So you want to make sure that you run the hot water out before you do your watering. So the next thing you're going to want to do is water in the fertilizer. The reason that you do this is so that the nutrients can start getting into that soil and then into the plant. In addition, fertilizers can burn your leaves. So if you notice that you had gotten any of your fertilizer on your leaves, you want to make sure that you go in and spray it off. Remember, when it comes to cucumbers, they are heavy feeders and heavy waterers. They like their water. So make sure that you're giving them proper water and that you're really watering in that fertilizer so that those nutrients will become readily available. So another issue that you may be facing is actually that the pollinators are unable to get into the blossoms or are having troubles finding the blossoms because of the fact that it is so heavily vegetated. You can see here that it's very dense and there's blossoms back in there. But a lot of times if the pollinators can't see them, they don't necessarily go to the blossoms. They're gonna go to what they see first. A solution is to go in and actually prune your cucumber bush, which will help in multiple ways. It'll help make those blossoms more visible for your pollinators. It also will help cut some of the nutrients away from vegetation and start putting it into more blossom production and giving the plant the energy that it needs to produce the female blossoms. So this is going to be a really good solution for you if you notice that your plant is very heavily packed with vegetation and that your blossoms are more hidden back behind the vegetation. Your best bet is going to be to sit back and watch what your pollinators are doing. See if they're able to get into those blossoms, or if they're only hitting the blossoms that are on the exterior of your plant. Do not prune when it is in the heat of the day. It is too much stress for your plant, so make sure that you are either doing it first thing early morning or in the evening after the sun is already starting to go down. as you can see, our cucumber plant is very highly vegetated, and it's not that that's necessarily a horrible thing, but in this circumstance where we're trying to treat the fact that we're not really getting a lot of fruit, it really makes it hard for the pollinators to see all the blossoms that are on there. They can see the ones that are on the surface, like these ones, but any of the ones that are deeper in, they just tend to not go to, which means that there are blossoms that are not getting pollinated that could very easily be fruit for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to prune out some of these leaves. That way there is more openness and the bees can see, hey, there are flowers in there that I want to get to and pollinate. We're on the other side of the cucumber plant, and as you can see, this side is still heavily vegetated. And this side I thinned out. I know it looks so dramatic and so devastating, but I promise you it fills out. I did this trimming on the entire plant 2 weeks ago, and you see how full and vegetated it is. So please don't panic when it comes to doing this. It's initially going to be shocking, but I promise you it's going to fill back in, and I'll explain to you why. When I go in and I prune and thin out my vegetation, what I try to do is I try to kind of keep the leaves that are more outward on the plant, and the ones that are deeper in are what I'm trimming out. And the reason I do this is because it allows this entire cavity of the plant to be very open. So once a bee goes in, say over here or over here, that whole entire inside of my plant is open, and they are able to see all the blossoms that are inside of there. Plus, when it comes around time to harvest, it's going to be easier for me to see cucumbers that are in my plant because I'm not looking through so much vegetation. They can get extremely lost in it, especially the type that I'm growing, which is an Armenian cucumber, which is going to be like this. And it's a very pale green. It's not a dark green. And so they really get lost inside that vegetation for quite a while, and you can't see them. There's many times I'll come out here and I'll think I don't have anything, and then once they get a little bit bigger, I'm like, oh, there is something there. For me, it makes sense to just hollow out the cavity and keep all of the leaves outward so that they're actually providing shade for the plant on the inside, and they're doing their job of photosynthesizing the entire plant. So I go in and I cut all that vegetation that's really making it densely packed on the inside, making it hard to see. It's hard for me to get around in there, and I know that it's hard for the pollinators to get around too, because I see them and I watch them, and I watch that they're only going to the exterior blossoms, not the interior blossom. You'll notice I do almost an every other leaf kind of pattern, so that there's spacing and gapping in between. Right here, there's a lot of gap. It's because I take the new growth and new shoots that are coming out, and I will start weaving these in and out the open spaces. When I weave them in and out, I will kind of set them in a formation to where those leaves are now filling in the gaps that you saw on the plant. And that's why I'm not afraid to be kind of intense about my pruning, is because I know I'm going to fill that in, and that's not going to become a huge area that's going to get sun damage, because this leaf will then grow, fill it in, and then it will keep that every other leaf pattern. So you just kind of want to assess, like, where am I going to put this new shoot of growth, and make sure that you're kind of making your leaf pattern according to that. Now, it doesn't have to be as intensive as I do it. I also like things very aesthetically pleasing whenever I look at my garden, and so I do things in a way that both benefits the plant, but also when you step back and look at it, it looks very pretty and almost like landscape. Now what I've done is I've gone through, and any of those new growth tendrils that were coming off, like how this is, I wove it in. And as you can see, now that patterning of the leaves is filling in. They're tiny right now, but remember, they're gonna grow. So this leaf will grow in and fill in this space. This leaf will grow in and fill in that space. You have this one over here that will grow and get bigger, this one. So see, once it grows a little bit, which is only going to take a few days, it'll start filling in all those gaps. However, it is still keeping it open because inside the cavity isn't densely vegetated. It's just going to be the outward leaves that get big and kind of help with photosynthesis of your plant. They help with shading the plant and just giving it protection without restricting your pollinators from being able to get in. It's sparse in comparison to what we were dealing with, where it's just heavily vegetated all throughout. You can't really get to anything. It's just hard to see. But remember, in a few days' time, all of these leaves are going to fill in that space, creating a canopy for the plant, but still allowing that empty cavity for the pollinators to get into. You want to make sure that any of the little tendrils that grab on and help to give support to the plant are wrapped around other branches. So you'll see right here, I did that. This one will start to wrap around that particular branch, giving it the support that it needs and teaching it to go downward. Since it's now gone over the top, we want it to start growing down. The other thing that I do is I go in and I thin out the vegetation that's at the top, because that starts making it hard for those new growth shoots to go over the trellis and fall down. They'll start to kind of smush everything down, and it really makes it difficult for that plant to grab onto something else and start growing the direction you want. Over at what I've already done, you can see I've really thinned out the leaf pattern on this side. If I take you around to the other side, this is the side that I haven't done yet, and you can see the vegetation is still really dense over here, where these new shoots just really don't know where to go, so they start going out in every which direction instead of falling over and grabbing onto the plant and actually giving itself stability. Here is a prime example of that. It's falling over and then it has nowhere to go, so it goes out. So when you're actually pruning off your leaves and thinning it out, you want to make sure that you're cutting it off as close to the main stem as possible so that no nutrients are lost to the main plant. When you take a look back, you can see that this side I have thinned out and pruned, and this side is still left full of vegetation. You can see the difference of how a pollinator could see the blossoms come in and pollinate that plant. I know it's kind of shocking to see, and it was for me the first time I did this, but when you see how fast this plant actually grows, you will understand that this is far more beneficial for that plant, because those nutrients that are going to each one of those leaves is now going into the plant, allowing it to put more energy into blossom production, allowing it to have enough energy to produce the female blossoms, which take a lot of energy for a plant. That's why you'll find a lot more male blossoms than you will female blossoms on your plant. And it also just allows those pollinators to freely get in, find it, pollinate it, and get out. Okay, everyone, it has been 5 days since I last pruned the cucumber plant. As you can see, I promised you it was going to fill back in. It was going to get a bunch of new growth in it. And you can see by looking at it, all that new growth, all of those leaves that are deeper within the plant are the ones that came off of those new shoots that I had woven in. So again, it might be terrifying to do this, but I promise you it's so beneficial to your plant. There's lots of new growth on here. I have new cucumbers, new blossoms. The bees have been working it like crazy. It is so beneficial to do this for your plant. So over here on the other side, same thing. Your vegetation is nice and filled in. Your plant looks pretty again. There's like 3 to 4 days of it looking like, oh man, what did I do? But it comes, it grows back in, it helps the plant out significantly. The energy goes to the fruit. They start to grow and get bigger, as you can see right here with those cucumbers. You start to get new growth. You start to get new blossoms. You get those new shoots. It is so beneficial to your plant. You won't regret doing this as long as you are not overly chopping your plant You will be thankful that you did this in the long haul. I know that this was a really long educational video, considering that I usually try to keep them 5 to 10 minutes. However, there was a lot of information to cover on the cucumbers and identifying the problems that they may have. I'm hoping from this information you can get more of a longer season out of your cucumber bushes and actually yield more production from one plant than you would have otherwise. Hopefully you learned a little bit about male and female blossoms, the correct kind of fertilizers to produce more blossoms, and even how to prune and reroute your new tendrils so that you are getting the most access for pollinators to that bush. I just hope that this was helpful in some way. Be sure to comment down below and let us know if you tried this and if it helped you with your cucumber production. We love to hear from you guys and interact and just hear about things that you're learning or things that you've tried, because sometimes with that boldness we can discover new and amazing things in our garden and teach one another those things as well. I'm hoping from my growing pains and my learning in the garden you can avoid some of these issues or know how to approach them when they happen. Just make sure that you are subscribing if you like this content, giving us a big thumbs up if you like it, and make sure that you have your notifications turned on. Until next time, remember that from humble beginnings, mighty things can grow if we just tend to it. Love you guys. Have a good week. Bye. I'm hoping hope you get, no, let's just start all over. How to fertilize our plants, what fertilizers we needed, and many other things. I hope that it was helpful in some way. Gosh. Okay. This is the last time. You have to get this, okay? Okay. And identifying the issues that cucumber... Where are you, Mr. Cucumber, that didn't get pollinated? I need to show you to my friends so that they understand.